Son, I don't think that's a costume. Written by Alec 2004.
It's October again, the spooky month where we all dress up and put out scary themed decorations in the spirit of Halloween. I'll be honest, just like most other people who casually celebrate the holiday, I don't really know the origins or purpose of it. In fact, if it wasn't for my 10-year-old son, I'd probably discard the traditions altogether. But he enjoys it, so I do too. Well, that was the case up until last year. It was another Halloween night in New England. The trees were barren, and the ground was laden with red leaves of all kinds. I'm sure if it was overcast or foggy, it would be quite frightening. But the night of the 31st October 2020 was rather clear at the start. The week prior to Halloween, my wife had taken my son, Quinn, out to shop for a costume. Despite having his heart set upon a Native American outfit and a Chiefs hat, she had convinced him to go for the Superman one instead. Original? No. But definitely wouldn't be drawing disapproving stares. Anyway, around 6 p.m. that evening, Quinn and I drove a couple of blocks of typical New England suburban sprawl away to his friend Andrew's house. They had been friends since they were in kindergarten, and so naturally I became friends with Andrew's father, and my wife became friends with his mother. When we arrived, Quinn rushed out of the car to meet up with Andrew, who was waiting eagerly in the doorway in his Harry Potter costume. While the boys laughed about their outfits and talked about all the candy they hoped to rake in that night, I made small talk with David and Vivian, Andrew's parents. It was just going to be David and myself taking the boys around the neighborhood that night, and Vivian was occupied with her month-old baby daughter, and my wife was bedbound with the flu. At 6:30 p.m., we set off, systematically knocking on every door on the street and blurting out the stereotypical trick or treat to those who stayed in. Luckily, there were no instances of people leaving an honest box of candy out on their porch, because Quinn can tend to be a little greedy when it came to raiding those. As the night wore on, David and I got progressively more tired, while the kids only seemed to get more hyper. Probably due to all the sugar in the candy and chocolate they ate as they went. However, the worst part was the fog that seemed to appear out of nowhere, and how it brought a brutal chill that we hadn't experienced almost all month. By 8:30, we had reached the outer limits of our neighborhood, and the houses became older and the gaps in between them got larger and larger. It was then we decided to turn around and start heading back. Although initially disappointed, Quinn and Andrew became excited at the idea of counting up and tallying all the junk food they had acquired overnight. The prospect of the next few days made my head throb. Quinn had a habit of eating as much candy as he could, as fast as he could. Meaning that right after Halloween, there was always periods of him becoming very hyper, and then very hard to deal with when he had come down from all the sugar. However, despite that, everything seemed to be going as planned. Right up until David tapped me on the shoulder.
Don't make it obvious, but there's some kid that's been following us for a little while now,
he said in a whisper. What kind of kid? Like a teenager or a child? I replied, curious.
I don't know. Around Andrew's age, probably.
If he keeps following us, we'll ask where his parents are. If not, so what?
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's a little weird that he's not with any type of guardian.
And with that, we came to an agreement. If this kid kept following us, we'd ask about his parents. If not, we'd just ignore it. Not a big deal. As the fog became more thick, I snugged a glance behind me to see that kid David was talking about. As he had said, the kid looked to be around about Quinn's age, but the age was pretty much the only similarity. Unlike my son, whose head was up and beaming with a smile, his was down at an almost unnatural angle, as if he was staring straight into his chest. Unlike my son, who walked and at times ran across the pavement normally, he dragged one leg behind the other, yet strangely kept up with us as if he too was walking normally. Unlike my son, whose store-bought Superman costume was tacky but clean, his was strange. At that point, I believed he was dressed up as some sort of ghost, as all that he wore was some white rags that seemed to barely cover him, and those shoes that covered his dirty feet. He was dressed like he was from some third world nation, a long way away from the middle-class suburbs of New England. I stopped. Looking back, I regret the decision, but I'm unsure if it would have made a difference whether I stopped or not. Either way, there's no way I would have known what was to come next. So I had to stop and make sure that this child was okay. Turning around, I called out to him and asked if he was alright. David stopped as well, along with Quinn and Andrew, who walked back to us and positioned themselves on either side of their fathers. I got no response, and the child in rags kept moving towards us, only stopping a few feet in front of David and Andrew. So I asked again, "Hey there, are you okay? Where are your parents?" Slowly this thing, raised its head off its chest. Its face was relatively normal, if it wasn't for the gray skin, lack of teeth, lacerations to his cheek, and the bandage that was wrapped around his head at eye level, covering up 2 red stains where eyes should be. Then its hand shot up, grabbing onto Andrew's arm with a gray hand that was missing a finger and all of its nails. Gently, David tried to slide its hand off Andrew and offered to call someone to pick him up. I could tell David was trying to be strong in front of the kids, but the slight tremble in his voice told me that he was anything but. Not like I can say much. I was the same. Despite David's attempts to push this thing's hand off of Andrew's arm, its grip only seemed to tighten. Andrew moaned and said that he was hurting him. Oblivious to the clear danger of the situation, Quinn only turned to me and commented on this kid's costume.
Dad, how do you think he got his costume? It's really good.
He asked, his innocence almost overwhelming. Son, I don't think that's a costume. And with that, David finally started to bash at the kid's arm, trying to pry it from Andrew, yet with no effect. Finally, the kid, the thing, the monster, said something. It started quiet, a murmur, but by the end of the short sentence, its voice became a crescendo of sound, radiating through the thick fog and filling my eardrums with horror.
"I just want a friend."
And then it ran, faster than I've ever seen somebody run before. Suddenly it wasn't limping anymore, and both legs had the power of an Olympic athlete, if not the size. Andrew screamed, David screamed, and Quinn and I watched in horror as Andrew was dragged away and swallowed up by the fog. However, despite Andrew screaming at the top of his lungs, as soon as we lost sight of him, the screaming stopped. He vanished. David was paralyzed for a split second before bolting off into the darkness to try and find Andrew, while I hugged Quinn as tightly as I could and sprang into action, dialing the police and explaining the situation as well as I could, while also trying to be believable. Within minutes, the police arrived, and not too long after, an ambulance to treat David for shock. Even though I wasn't treated, I'm sure I wasn't far off of David's mental state either. The next few days were a blur. Searching parties, police interviews, the works. I swear I have looked into every nook and cranny of the whole county, combing woods and being present when police divers searched the bottom of ponds, lakes, and rivers. Despite all of that, we never found Andrew. And now that Halloween is right around the corner, all I've been thinking about is Andrew and his kidnapping. I know I won't be letting Quinn go out this year. I'll be holed up inside with them. I don't know who or what that kid was, but I hope that he found a friend in poor Andrew, and so won't be out looking for another. You never know, though.